Hi, my name is Gayatri Ramprasad. I'm the founder and president of Asha International, a nonprofit organization dedicated to normalizing conversations about mental health and inspiring hope and healing, one story at a time. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to Conversations on Hope and Healing. The COVID pandemic, the racial injustice, police brutality, all are taking an incredible toll on all of our mental health and well-being. Our goal through Asha International is to share stories of hope and resilience and offer wellness steps and resources to all of you and let you know that no matter how you're feeling today, you are not alone. No matter what your struggles are, you're not alone. Together, we will rise through these difficult times stronger, kinder, and more resilient. Today, I am delighted to welcome Melody Moezzi to share her story and talk about how Rumi's poetry helped heal her heart and mind. Melody is an Iranian American activist, attorney, and an award-winning author. Her latest book, The Rumi Prescription: How an Ancient Mystic Poet Changed My Modern Manic Life, is a prescription that has the power to heal all of us despite our deeply divided and chaotic times. You can learn more about Melody's work at melodymoezzi.com. Hi, Melody.
Hi, Gayatri. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, welcome. I am delighted that you're here with us. For those of us who may not know who Rumi is, Melody, would you like to tell us who Rumi was and how the incredible, timeless wisdom of his poetry has helped you heal and thrive?
Sure. Rumi is a 13th century Persian Sufi mystic, Islamic scholar, jurist, a whole lot of things, and a poet. So I grew up with my dad reciting Rumi to me ever since I was a kid. And like most children of addicts, which he was definitely an addict when it came to Rumi, I really resented the object of my father's addiction for a long time. And it wasn't until I was 30 that I started to see that this poetry that was so central to my own ancestry had a healing capacity for me. It wasn't until I lost my mind that I came to Rumi, which is apt because Rumi talks about going mad in a good way a lot in his poetry. And what he means by that is a different kind of, it's not, as somebody with a clinical mental health condition, it's not something that he encourages like that, but to him, madness is more about love, being, like we say, madly in love, right? Like that sort of, that's the kind of madness, the madness that brings us together and unifies us, that he supports, whereas the kind that he doesn't, and he contrasts it with, is the kind that creates fundamentalism, the kind that divides us. So for now, for the last 10 years, it's been really useful to be reading this poetry, especially now. So
absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about your own mental health story and
sure.
how we came to rediscover
how we met, how we came together?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
So there's a lot of mental health memoirs for those of you watching, and there aren't that many by women of color. And so Gayatri and I were once at a conference together. It was a DBSA conference, right? Like, just in discovering you was extraordinary for me. Just being like, there's another one of me. Like, that she wrote a memoir as well about her own mental health journey. And anyway, so that's how the two of us met, so you all know. But in terms of my mental health history, I have bipolar disorder type 1. I was diagnosed when I was 29 after an acute manic episode and a psychotic break, because I always do things, all out. I was going to do the full acute psychotic, full-blown psychosis for me. Hallucinations, delusions, like I hadn't had those before that happened when I was 29. And by that point, I had already graduated law school and earned a master's in public health, written my first book. So I'd done a lot And then I was diagnosed with bipolar and really had no idea what it even was. And it felt, metaphorically, as an Iranian American Muslim, it felt apt as well. So yeah, that's a bit of my history, and I have been on sort of a journey of recovery since. And I believe in medication and poetry and love and all different kinds of things to keep me well, and that's what works for me. And I believe for others, like whatever works for you. I don't think there's a formula.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, for most people, sharing our mental health story is terrifying.
Yeah.
What inspired you to share your story, to write a memoir, to become the activist and the advocate that you have been?
I've learned as an activist that when you're afraid of something, that's where you need to go. That is where I also, as an artist, like that's where the best art comes from. And I think that's how you grow, and that's how you heal as a human being. And for me, one of the hardest parts of this whole journey and just having bipolar disorder, the hardest part of it had nothing to do with the clinical condition. It had everything to do with the way society viewed that condition. And that was something that I, you know, as somebody, I had a pancreatic tumor when I was 19 that nearly killed me, you know, so I know what that's like. I know what medical struggles are like, but I knew nothing of what this was like. So when I was hospitalized for my psychiatric condition, I had something to compare it to that I already thought, like I thought the American healthcare system was dehumanizing and horrible in a lot of ways, but the American mental health system, and not just American, like worldwide, our mental health system, it doesn't exist. And I was horrified by how people were treated, how I was treated, specifically the use of solitary confinement as a treatment for, in my case, mania, but something that we use over and over to treat and to punish people. In this country, where it's worth noting our largest mental health facilities are jails and prisons, and we use solitary confinement more than any other country on the planet. And my hope is right now that's going to change. And I think partly those of us who are in isolation, feeling what that's like, can get a sense of if it's that bad and that troubling, and you can walk around your entire house and do whatever you want, basically just within your own house. Imagine what that's like within a small enclosed space and have somebody who has control over you. So I just hope that this moment changes people's view of that. And I'm not sure it will, but I do have that hope.
I share the same hope as somebody that has also experienced seclusion. I agree. It's one of the most dehumanizing ways to treat another human being, especially in a moment of their crisis, when they need the love and the compassion and human contact more than any time in their lives. But I also have hope in people like you standing up and sharing your story, Melody. It's the only way forward for us to share our humanity. And, like Rumi says, let me quote him. It's one of my favorite quotes in your book. "The wound is the place where the light enters you." I truly believe that all of us are wounded in some way or the other, especially right now in the world that we live in, whether it's the pandemic or the racial injustice or the police brutality that we're seeing all around us every single day. But it is in the midst of that wound and that dark, that light will enter. And I think each and every one of us can be the mirror, reflects that light to each other and to support each other and light our path forward from all of this. To all of our viewers, I welcome any questions and comments. Please share them, and Melody or I will be very happy to answer you as well. So often we, the people living with mental health conditions, are told to lower our expectations. And I'm sure you were told the same in your journey. Can you tell us a little bit about that and your insight on why not? Why should not lower?
Yeah. So I was told, like I said, when I was diagnosed, I'd already graduated law school, earned a master's in public health, published my first book. I had just won, I was living in the state of Georgia. I had just won a Georgia Author of the Year award for that first book. So I was an accomplished person misdiagnosed with depression. Like a lot of people with bipolar, I was misdiagnosed. It usually takes 8 to 10 years to get a proper diagnosis, and I was no different. But once I got that proper diagnosis, I went to the expectation of others of me seemed to change. And by others, I mean the mental health providers. And to their credit, there's some extraordinary mental health providers out there, and I give them a lot of credit and gratitude. There are a lot who are burnt out as well, and I give them my compassion, but there are also a lot who should not be in this field at all. Like they're not built for it. This is spiritual, sacred work when you're dealing with somebody in the midst of a mental health crisis. And it's an opportunity, and it is one that is lost over and over again. And for me, I was told upon leaving a facility, and we've talked about this, leaving a facility before, that basically by a woman who was my outtake coordinator, I was supposed to be leaving and supposedly integrating back into normal society, whatever it is. And she literally, after having met me for 5 minutes, and I'd not seen her the whole week, 10 days that I had been in the hospital, she said to me, "You need to lower your expectations for your life." And I am deeply grateful to have been raised by the parents I was raised by. Strong, immigrant, Iranian, Muslim, American parents. And they are the ones who responded through me. When she said, "Lower your expectations for your life," my immediate response was what they raised me to say, which was, I said, she was twice my age, but I said, "Girl, raise yours." Yeah. I'm not about to lower my expectations. And that is 100% credit to my parents, but also makes me think, what about all those people who don't have that privilege? And you say, like, what about your activism? Like, what makes you pursue activism and advocacy? And I think it's probably similar to you as well. We have people who love us in our lives. We have privileges other people don't have. Certainly, like, there are places we have liabilities. But I have all these, I have an education, I have access to resources, I have health insurance. Like, there's so many things that I have access to that other people don't. And most importantly is a supportive family. And I know not everybody has that. So if I have that, and I'm able to make a living, I'm not risking what other people might be risking and being public about this, I feel like it's an obligation, and to a certain extent, it feels to me like it would be criminal not to speak up, especially being who I am, because I've been an activist long before I was ever diagnosed with a mental health condition.
I agree with you 100%. While you were speaking, I was remembering Toni Morrison's quote, "The function of freedom is to free somebody else."
Absolutely. Right?
And for every one of us, that you're right, not everybody has the privileges that you and I have had. Not everybody has the family support that you and I have had. Not everybody has the opportunities that you and I have had. So therefore, we also have a burden of responsibility, or the privilege of responsibility.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Being able to stand up and speak up and humanize what has for humanities, the centuries, and as long as humanity has existed, be a condition that's been dehumanized and stigmatized against. And so it's a privilege to be able to speak up and humanize and normalize conversations about mental health. Couldn't agree more. I love the story of the very first time that Melanie won her activism. Girl, would you mind sharing that story?
Yeah. My first protest was arranged after we had an ice cream man who would come to all of the neighborhoods around ours, but not our neighborhood. We lived on a really steep hill, and he was afraid of that his truck would break going up it. We learned later. But I thought it was a human rights violation that he would not come to our neighborhood. So I got all of the neighborhood stakeholders, meaning like the 3 children. It was a very small neighborhood. And we went to the bottom of our steep hill and we held up signs. I lived on Wooden Shoe Lane in Dayton, Ohio. And so my sign said, "Ice cream man, wooden shoe wants you all caps you. And we won. Within a week, he came, his truck didn't break. And to this day, as far as I know, he still goes to Wooden Shoe Lane in Dayton, Ohio, which is the most success probably I've had, like immediate success and quick success I've had as an activist. But after that, I was hooked. And so like I started my high school Amnesty International chapter. I did a lot of activism as a young, I was 7 or 8 years old when that happened. So yeah, it's been a while.
Thank you. I love that story. I love that story, especially in this day and age of protest. You know, it reminds me of the power of protest, right? It is a civil liberty and it's a human right. When used well, it can be incredibly effective. And you've advocated for many causes in the past. So would you like to share a few of the other arenas in which you have been an activist and how that has, panned out? Yeah.
So in my progression, so it goes through conflicts. So after the 7 or 8 year old ice cream situation, then there was the war in Bosnia was happening when I was in middle school. In high school, my cause was Ogoniland in Nigeria. If you're familiar with Ken Saro-Wiwa, the poet, and 8 other Oganis who were killed by effectively Shell oil. So writing, so I was writing a lot of letters to dictators in high school. That was my whole thing. And then after 9/11 is when my activism through writing really began. And I wrote my first book about young Muslim Americans called War on Error, Real Stories of American Muslims, to combat the Islamophobia after 9/11. It feels strange saying that because at the time I just thought there's no way it could get worse than this. I really didn't. I was so naive. I thought this, like with this book, the whole point of it was I was introducing my reader to a dozen young Muslim Americans of all different backgrounds, Black, white, brown, gay, straight, bi, like just all these different backgrounds. And just to give an idea to a lot of Americans, I grew up in Ohio, I live in North Carolina, and I've been in places where there aren't necessarily a lot of Muslims. So I basically wanted to let people meet them through my books. And these were all people I really love and admire. And now to think of what's happened since is disappointing. Deeply disappointing. As a lawyer, it's disappointing. Like to watch this, I can nerd out about it, but like to watch them strike down Korematsu in the same decision where they also were saying it's okay to ban Muslims from coming here was horrifying because that was basically as lawyers we figured out that Korematsu had been struck down regardless through legislation in a lot of ways, but to see the court do it finally felt good, but then on the other side of it to come out and say that it was okay to ban my people, like to ban effectively what was very clearly a Muslim ban and what has now become a Muslim and African ban was horrifying to me. So I have hope that Congress can change that, but right now I thought Islamophobia would be done. It's not. So I'm still fighting that struggle as well. And I'm an LGBTQ rights activist as a straight cisgender woman. It's really important to me because there are places I have privilege. And as a straight cisgender woman, I have tons of privilege there. So because of that and because of how horribly I see LGBTQ people around the world being treated, it's become really important to me to fight for their rights as well as an ally.
Well, I can't thank you enough for all that you do. And I know it's disappointing that we are not at a better place already. But it takes all of us to continue our advocacy and continue to stand up and speak out, especially for those of our brothers and sisters that can't do that for themselves. So it's even more, it's much more of a responsibility for those of us that can. And I'm so glad that you're doing that. So, one of the quotes that I loved in your book, which I will, there. it guides me every day. Thank you for writing that book, Melody. It's this incredibly pertinent quote for this time and in our lives. Forget your plans and embrace uncertainty. Only then will you find stability, says Rumi. How are you putting that in practice?
Well, we were talking before we went live. I'm in the middle of moving. So just everything's shifting under my feet. And I think for all of us, everything is shifting under our feet all the time, but we're not always aware of it in the same way. Like just the cells in our body are regenerating all the time. Like just so much is changing all the time within us and around us. And right now, I think one of the blessings of this time is a lot of us have been forced to slow down and not travel all the time. And for me, traveling is everything. Like I do a lot of traveling, a lot of speaking, and I miss it. But I also have found a lot of grace and mercy in this moment. Just to be able to sit still for a while. And even, with the moving into a new house and all of that, but still being within my own house, like that was something that had to happen. But acknowledging that things can and will change more than I think we don't normally think about it. We don't normally think that things are changing all the time, but they are. And now it's so obvious, and I think this is such a weird year, this 2020, I don't know how it's going to go down in history, but it's definitely the most ridiculous, horrible, amazing, strange year I have ever lived through. And I'm trying to be present in it. And to whatever, and maybe this is, everyone keeps saying the new normal. I've never been normal, so I'm not really a fan of that anyway, but maybe the world is realizing they're insane. We're not the ones who are crazy. Maybe they're getting at this point, the people who you've labeled mentally ill, those are some of the same people who can help you out of this. Because, even at the beginning when this started, everyone's like, oh, we have to isolate, whatever. I'm like, that's just depression. Like I'm familiar with this. I know what that is. And it's funny in a way. I feel like I'm more prepared for it just because self-care. I know how important self-care is, because I am forced to take care of myself in ways that so-called normal people aren't. They don't have, they cannot sleep for a night and not have hallucinations. I can't, Yeah. So no matter what's happening, I still have to eat and sleep, and love and read, and just that there are things that I need to sustain myself.
You're absolutely right. I often get asked the same question, how are you doing?
Yeah.
And my answer is just about the same as everybody. Some days are a little easier than others, and some days are just painful, even just to get through, right? But to your point, having had the journey that you and I have had, whether it's with acute depression or suicidality or anxiety or all of this, what it feels like. And over a matter of decades, you develop a self-care practice because that's how you're going to survive, right? And a network of social connections, whether it's family or friends or whoever that is. And at a time like this, it's come in so handy, just the practice of meditation or exercise and all of those supports that we had put in place. Thank goodness, that structure is holding us together, and it's what all of us have to do, whether we're struggling with mental health or not. And that's the other thing that the pandemic, I think, is highlighting, that mental health is for all of us, much like physical health is for all of us. So, and now everybody gets it, just like everybody understands what the pandemic is doing. Everybody understands the impact life can have, plain old life can have on our mental health. And so, when you think of the ignorance about mental health, I think this is a great moment of awakening for all of us to wake up and understand how important it is to take care of our mental health, in addition to our physical health and spiritual health and all other aspects of health as well. Culture, this is something unique that you and I can connect on and talk about. You and I are cradled between very diametric cultures, you between Iran and America, and maybe India and America. So, what are your thoughts on how culture has impacted your journey? Have there been barriers that are specific to either culture, and how have you overcome them?
Yeah. There's a strong sense of what will people think in the Iranian community. I know the Indian community is nothing like that.
Not at all. That's the only thing that drives us.
But this notion of like, what will people think was so strong at the beginning, especially when you're a high achiever and all of that. And I, both my parents are doctors. They immediately, thank God, accepted the medical side of this, but they also were like, let's not tell anyone, like the combination of like, we believe in you, we know you can do this, but let's just not talk about it.
Yeah.
And that to me was the most damaging part of just like not being able to talk about it. And also that has become the gift of it. I once a week at least, I talk to Iranian parents. I talk to Iranian parents I don't know, who know other Iranian parents I do know, who have referred me, and they have a child who has specifically bipolar disorder. A lot of us have this apparently, or they've all found me, I guess. And I talk to them. I just talk to them, and I try and encourage them. And frequently I find myself in situations where it's like, you're going to have to do something you don't want to do. They're dealing with a child or a brother or a sister who has bipolar, often who isn't willing to take medication or doesn't understand, doesn't have insight into the fact that they're ill, which is part of the illness. So it's not an easy position to be in. But I think that has also been a blessing, just to be able to have all these other Iranians, Muslims, Middle Easterners, children of immigrants, like just people who get what it's like to be between two cultures, and also to be, there's parts of Persian culture that are so much kinder to a mental health condition, but also harsher. Like there are parts of it where it's kinder in the sense that mysticism is so valued. And if you were to think of someone like Rumi, who is the first of the so-called whirling dervishes, right? Like reciting poetry. Most of his poetry he didn't write down. He recited it while he was spinning in place and sung it. Like you sing this poetry. You don't just recite it. You sing it. And it rhymes, right? So it's a song. So he's just reciting thousands, tens of thousands of rhyming couplets. And if he were alive today and doing that in any city in America, he would be in a hospital pretty quickly, So there are parts of it that I've learned, like a lot of us between two cultures, we've learned to take the good from each culture, and use that for what it's useful for, and scrap the rest. I mean, like use what works for you.
Couldn't agree more. Mental health conditions doesn't just impact the individual.
Yeah.
It really impacts the family and the community at large, And what words of hope and advice do you have for families, especially for all families, but also for families like yours and mine, where we are stuck between two, cradled, not stuck, cradled.
Yeah. I like that.
There's these high expectations and a lack of clear understanding of the emotional health and the mental health of a human being, right? What advice and what words of hope do you have?
So first, for families, especially parents, but just families in general, number one, take care of yourself. It's vital that you take care of yourself. And in our culture, as an Indian culture, taking care of yourself is not really valued. Like it's something, take care of the community, take care of your family. But part of taking care of your family is taking care of yourself, and to recognize that if you're not taking care of your own mental health, there's nothing you can do to help somebody else. And especially because I talk to the vast majority of people I talk to are parents of adult children. And these are people who you cannot force. Thankfully, you cannot, like generally you shouldn't be able to force someone into the hospital for the most part. But if somebody is unaware and in crisis, and unfortunately, that's the only time ever anyone thinks about this stuff is in the middle of a crisis, you know, like wake up. We shouldn't be thinking about this in the middle of a crisis. It's too late at that point. So I would advise family, one, just it's really important to take care of yourself. But also when it comes to sort of cultural issues and things like that, this is not an American, like mental illness is not an American thing. Yeah. And I think that notion is something we need to wipe away as much as we can. I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of that idea that like, oh, this doesn't exist in Iran. We don't really have, like, yes, you do. Yeah. You have it. We all have it. And it's something that it's important for families to recognize that these illnesses are not just illnesses, they are also blessings. They are also gifts because they allow our minds to work differently. They allow us to see solutions where other people don't see them. They allow us to be creative in ways that other people are not. They allow us to take risks that other people would never take. My whole life is a series of risks no one would ever take. But I was born to parents who took the risk of leaving their home country, yeah. Right? Like these are people who are willing to take big risks, and you don't get big rewards unless you take big risks, you know? So just to remember that whether it's your children or whether it's your siblings or just your friend, remember that they have not changed once they receive a diagnosis. They're the same person they were. And the only thing I fear about telling people, or I used to fear about it, is that people would treat me differently. And I know other people, and it's not just it's not just mental health conditions. There are other highly stigmatized conditions. I have friends who have HIV. There are certain conditions that people are more ashamed to talk about than others. And the truth is, it doesn't matter what your illness is. It's number one, it's not your fault, and number two, it is something that you can treat. Like there's ways to live without being fully well all the time, but to still be doing well, you know?
Absolutely. And you and I are the living proof that we
exactly
can't do it, you know? So with that, you know, I just want to ask you one last question. What gives you hope, darling?
Love.
Beautiful answer. Thank you, Melody John.
Thank you, Gayatri John.
Joy, such a joy being with you. Thank you, and I wish you the very best. And I know you and I are gonna stay connected no matter.
Yeah, I love you. Take care of yourself. It was so great to see you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So thank you all for joining us this afternoon. Melody is amazing, as you all can see for yourself. If you or someone you love is struggling with their mental health, please know that you're not alone. There is hope. And at ASHA International, we have a lot of wellness resources for you and your loved one. Please come visit us at myasha.org and join us again on Friday, that's August 14th, for yet another conversation on hope and healing with Eric Mars. Goodbye. Have a wonderful afternoon.